All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to From Zero to Claude Code in 90 minutes, targeted 2 PMs. And oh my goodness, I'm looking at the counter increase with the number of participants. We were looking at the signups for this Maven course. It was amazing, which tells me one thing. A lot of you out there are interested in learning by building. So, really excited for today. Hopefully, you'll come out of it with not just the mindset and the tools, but also just real experience building and getting hands-on as well. I've been in product management for a couple decades, and this era is something new. It's one thing to be able to do, I guess, back in my day, PM mocks or to just try to get things done. But nowadays, you can actually build, which is amazing. Okay. So today we're going to get hands-on. And I wanted to highlight as a part of this is part of a broader curriculum to be able to learn how to build and how to think in the era of AI. So if you're interested, you can also dive deeper into the AI product management certification. We'll put a link on the chat if you're interested in learning more. Okay. In the meantime, let's dive in. I am excited to introduce our resident expert, Carl Bellotti. Carl, wave hello, and everybody, if you can wave, do a high five emoji if you're not on camera, something to give a hello. Uh, Carl is the creator of Claude Code for PMs. This is where, if you haven't played with this tool already, it's one of the only courses where you can learn Claude Code in Claude Code. It's really fun. It feels hands-on. He's also the founder of the Full Stack PM. This is the #1 community for PM builders with the Full Stack PM. Highly recommend all of you sign up to the newsletter. And he's a former product lead at Redfin, Goodfix, and he'll shipped stuff used by millions, whether big companies or startups. So really excited to have him here today. Carl, to start you off, I'm curious, what prompted you to start the Full Stack PM?
Hello, everyone. It is great to be here. It's crazy how many people have signed up, and I keep seeing the participants increasing. So this is very exciting. Yeah, so last year, kind of early in the year, when vibe coding sort of became a new term and started to become really popular, I downloaded Cursor and I started playing with it. And I couldn't believe that it was then possible to actually build stuff, like actually build and fully deploy and just actually finally be able to do so many of the things that I'd been wanting to do so long as a PM. And so I just really went deep into it. And I realized that while there's a lot of AI PM content out there, there isn't a lot of stuff that's really specifically about the building. A lot of it is about like the news or kind of the industry. And so I started the Full Stack PM to be sort of the place where if you really want to be hands-on and using the tools directly, this is kind of your spot to just really focus on the actual building and implementation using all these amazing new tools. And so today, what we're going to cover, I took the title of the session pretty seriously. So we're going to go from zero, if you have just downloaded Claude Code for the first time, all the way up to being pretty good at using Claude Code. I'm going to show you lots of tips and tricks for how you can become a much more advanced user. I'll leave you with a way that you can use Claude Code to build out your own product management system, and that's something that I'll talk about as we go through how you can build out all your own workflows in Claude Code. And today we are going to build an actual prototype. And what I'll show you is how can you use AI as a thinking partner so that instead of just saying, hey, go build this thing, it will actually interview you and ask you tons of questions so that the thing that ends up getting built is exactly what you wanted. And you can use AI as a thinking partner. So rather than having it kind of just do the thing for you, you're actively involved in that process. And your overall work is just much higher quality. And I think that that's really kind of what being an AI PM is it's not just having AI do the work, it's learning how to use AI to be your tool to do the work much better than you could and much better faster and much faster than you could without it. So a lot to cover today, but I think it'll be really fun. And the last thing I'll note is once we get started, this is going to be fully interactive. So everything that I'm doing on my computer, I'll have some files for you to download and you can follow along and do everything exactly the same on your computer.
All right, so let's get building. And I do want to highlight if you have questions during the session, as you can see, oh my goodness, we're getting to 920 participants, so rising as we speak. Please submit and vote for questions on Slido. We'll send the link out on the chat just to be able to streamline. It's kind of hard with the mute and the logistics and everything. So if you have questions during the session, please post on Slido. We'll get to as many as we can. Otherwise, we'll also follow up offline and share afterwards. Okay? Carl, on to you.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let me kind of just introduce home base for us today. So I have built kind of like a small little website that has all of the information that we have as we go that you can use to follow along. So I'm going to post this link in the chat, but it's fullstackpm.com/zero to pro. So go to that site. And hopefully you saw that there were some pre-instructions yesterday for you to go ahead and download the two things that we need for today, which are Claude Code and Cursor. You might be a bit confused. This is a Claude Code session, so why are we using Cursor? Cursor, besides all of its nice AI features, is just a really nice way to be able to view files. And it's just a good editor. And so as we go through the course today, most of the editor stuff that we'll do in Cursor, but we won't be using any Cursor features. We'll just be using Claude Code. So if that's confusing, I'll kind of hit on that again as we go. And then as we kind of go through this whole course, I'll really clearly say like which part of the course we're doing, so you know the exact prompts that you can copy in. And we're going through a real scenario. So you can download files that are kind of realistic files as if you were working at a company, and that's what those prompts will be used against. So I would say, well, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we do have a lot to cover, but if you have not installed Claude Code or Cursor, I can give you some quick tips on how you can do that. For Claude Code, the easiest way is if you go to the website here, depending on if you're on Windows or Mac. If you are on a Mac, then the first thing we're going to do, so this is our first kind of instruction for the day, is we need to get our terminal open. So the fastest way to open your terminal is to do, and this is on Mac, I think it's similar on PC, is Command space, and then we're just going to search for the terminal. Sorry, I have a pop-up. One sec. One second. Technical difficulties. My computer is not letting me type. Let me stop sharing for 1 second so I can figure out what is happening. Okay. Okay, we'll try that again. Okay, so open your terminal. Something is happening with the screen share. Okay. Well, 1 second. We'll go ahead and I think I actually have a terminal open, luckily. Okay, so open your terminal, and then the main thing that you're going to do is you'll just enter this command that we have on that Anthropic has on their website. So I would say if you are not able to if this doesn't work on your first shot, then that is okay. It should work where you copy this and then you'll paste it into your terminal. And as soon as you paste it into your terminal and hit enter, it will try to install Claude Code. I will say this usually works. It doesn't always work. So if you're having any issues, then the whole session today, you can follow along. It will all be recorded, and you can easily kind of catch up later. And on Windows, the app that you're going to open is called PowerShell, and it's the similar command with this one, the second one. You'll copy that into your PowerShell app and then hit enter. This is the scariest kind of thing that we'll have to do ever with Claude Code. Once you get it installed, it's much simpler. So if you don't already have it installed and you didn't see those emails that went out before the session, I would say don't worry about it too much. You'll be able to follow along. I'm going to share everything on my screen as we go. Okay, and the other thing that I would say is good to do is throughout this whole lesson, I'll introduce the scenario here. So you are a new PM at a company called Faculty Products. You're all muted, so I will just assume that you think that is as hilarious as I do. And you have just started here. You have just taken a role as a PM at this company. The role has been open for a couple months, and the manager is a good manager, and they've been doing the best job that they can, but they have just kind of fallen behind. And so they've hired you. You are this AI native PM. They really need you to catch up quickly. They're going to give you a bunch of files that are just kind of disorganized, and they're saying, okay, please take this, please figure out what we need to do, and please have a prototype. And they're going to give you a whole week to do this stuff. But because we're AI native PMs and we're using Claude Code, we're going to do it in 1 hour. So to get these files, you can scroll up to the top and click Download Starter Files. And then go ahead and just open that file and then unzip it. And then put it somewhere that is easy for you to access. So I now have this file here. It's called Starter Files, and I'm putting it on my desktop. So I'll give everyone a second. Download those files, unzip them, and then put it somewhere that you're going to be able to access easily. Okay. Once you have that done, then we're going to do our first thing here, which is we are going to launch Claude Code with these files. So the easiest way to do it is if you right-click on that file, then there should be an option called New Terminal at Folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Terminal at Folder. It's a similar option if you are on Windows as well. So now we have that terminal open again. I think what's happening is that the Zoom keeps doing the waiting room thing. It might be better. Is it possible to make me not a co-host actually, and then just make it so I can share screen?
Yeah, just for context, everybody, we have over 1,000 people joining this event, which is kind of unheard of in Maven Lightning event history. So, Carl, no pressure.
Yeah, I think what's happening is just every time someone is in the waiting room, it's kicking my cursor out of where I'm at. So I'm gonna just for 1 second stop sharing. And
Carl,
then
you're no longer a co-host, so it shouldn't be an issue anymore.
okay, great. Okay. All right. So now we have our starter files open. And if you already have Claude installed, then the way that you launch Claude into a file is we just type the word Claude. Okay. So, and then I'm just going to give it access to this file. Hooray. We now have Claude Code open. So the initial setup of Claude Code, the installation can be a little bit intimidating. And then, you're in the terminal, so that can seem kind of scary. But now we are in the terminal, and you never have to type another terminal command ever again. Because now that we're in Claude Code, we're basically just talking to a chatbot. If you've ever used ChatGPT or any LLM, it's just the same. So we say hi. And then some nice stuff, it's architecting, and it says hello. One thing, I'm using an app called Whisperflow, which is just kind of a way for me to talk and it will type as I go. Say hello to over 6,000 product faculty students joining us for a live session. So we're telling Claude that we are in this live session. So if you've ever used Claude or if you ever use any chatbot, this part is going to be very typical, and we're just doing it in our terminal. And then let me do a few things just to orient you into like kind of what you can do here in Claude Code. If you type /, it will show you some different commands. There's a bunch of different ones. You don't need to know all of them. The main ones that I just want to show you quickly, one is model. So if you do /model, it will show you the kind of like main 3 models that Anthropic creates, which are the defaulted one that you'll be in is Opus 4.5, which is the most powerful model. Sonnet is kind of the mid-tier model that is also still very good. And Haiku is sort of just the fast model that you do for very quick tasks. If you are on a pro plan, which most of you probably are for Claude, I recommend today just switching to Sonnet, and I'm also going to switch to Sonnet. This just makes sure that we don't like use up all of our usage limit before we get to the end. And Sonnet will definitely be able to do everything we need to do. So first thing I'm going to do here is just switch to Sonnet. And the only other thing to know is that if you type clear, then it will just go ahead and basically start a new session for you. So now it's as if we just started. If you're in ChatGPT, you click a new chat, and now we have a new chat going. So we'll do that a few times throughout, just so that it knows that we're starting a new conversation. Okay, so that's just to kind of get you oriented quickly in how to use Claude Code. And let's do our first thing as we try to get onboarded into faculty products. So as we go throughout this whole course, you'll be able to just scroll, and then the exact prompts that I'm going to use are on this page. Again, that's fullstackpm.com/0to pro. And you can see that up here. And I'm just going to copy these in. So this first one says summarize company overview. What do I need to know as a new PM? Okay, so what is this actually doing? Well, here's the file that our manager gave us. It has some different text documents. It has some research. It has some templates. Um, when the way that you can have Claude read a file is you use the at symbol. So when I type at and then I start typing, it will just sort of search whatever the files are in the folder that we have Claude open in and find those. So when we do this command, um, please read company overview and tell me what I need to know as a new PM. Then what it will do is we can kind of see it's using its read tool here and it's reading that document and it will then kind of give us a summary. And the next thing that we'll do is I'll show you how you can actually read these documents. Okay, so it's reading, it's manifesting. That's one kind of like nice, delightful thing about Claude Code. It has all these little funny words. Okay, so it's telling us that what is this company that we have just signed up for? So we work for faculty products. So if you've ever, if you go to a university, the people who work at a university are faculty members. So our main product that we have here as PMs at faculty products is GradeFlow, which is a course management platform for over 200 universities. So just for context, you don't need to read the whole thing, but that's kind of the scenario that we're going through today is we are building a tool that helps professors work with their teaching assistants, or otherwise TAs is the other kind of word you'll see throughout. Okay, so that's great, but you're probably wondering, how do I actually see this file and what is .md? So what we're going to do next is the other instruction for you to know for today is we need to open these in an editor. So you can do everything that we're doing today. You could literally do all of these commands just in this terminal, but you won't be able to see or really work with any of the files that we're talking about. So we need to open them in an editor. My recommended editor for today is just going to be Cursor. If you've heard of Cursor, it is like one of the other most popular AI coding tools. We're not going to use any of the AI tools in Cursor. We're just going to use the editor, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and open Cursor. And once you have Cursor open, you're just going to find that same file that you downloaded earlier. So for me, because I have a couple of them, it's the starter files, but for you, it should just be copy3, but for you, it should just be starter files. We're going to open that. Oh, let me get it from the desktop. Okay, so now we are in Cursor. The first thing is you make sure that you are in the editor view. In the upper left, there'll be agents versus editor. Agents is kind of like the thing that Cursor is building for their own kind of Claude Code type of agent experience. But today we're just going to be in the editor. And then the other thing that can be kind of confusing when you first open Cursor is they have this chat pane over here. This is not Claude Code. This is Cursor's own AI feature. So it's the same model, but it's kind of through their system, and you have to have a Cursor account. We're just going to close that. So if you go to the upper right and you look at this Cursor symbol, there's a toggle AI pane button. Click that, and we're just going to close it. Okay, so this is basically what every editor that you ever work in is going to look like. You'll have this main workspace here, and then we have these files. And these files that we have on the side, these are the exact same files that we just opened here. It's literally the same. Like if we deleted it here, it would delete here. So this is just basically opening that folder in Cursor. So I'm going to close this because now we have it all here. And if you click on any of these, so a .md is a markdown file. And that is just kind of like the standard type of way that all documents are formatted kind of in the back end. And so when you're in an editor like this and you click on one, then you see that raw markdown. And it's not it as you get better with Claude Code, it becomes easier to kind of like just parse this, but it is a little bit hard to see. So when you're in Cursor, and this is pretty much the same in all editor, if you right click and then you click this open preview button, it'll display that in a much nicer way. So this is how you would typically see things like if you're in Google Docs or Confluence or any sort of like editing platform. Okay, so we have our editor, we have a file open, but how do we actually get Claude Code in here? So we had the terminal open outside of Claude Code before, but we need to open the terminal inside of Cursor. So the main way to do that, if you just have this kind of view open here, there's this button that says Show Terminal. So we're just going to click Show Terminal. If you don't see that option for some reason, it's also very easy. In the upper left, there's a terminal button. You'll just click New Terminal. Okay, so now we have a terminal open. And remember, the only terminal command you actually need to know, really, once you have Claude Code installed, is just the word Claude. Okay, so the exact same thing when we had the terminal outside of cursor open, we now have Claude open inside of cursor. My preferred way to kind of do this is if you click like where we see this little terminal symbol, I like to drag it onto the right. And this is my favorite setup where we have our files and everything that we're working with on the side here. We have our middle section, which is kind of like where we work with documents. And then we have Claude here on the side. So this is pretty similar, and this is why it can be confusing to that cursor setup. Cursor often will also have this on the side, but we're going to close that and just have Claude Code over here. Okay, so I promise all the setup, that stuff is like the hardest part of just in general getting started with any new tool. The rest of the entire session, once you have Claude Code open in cursor, becomes really easy because at this point to follow along, all you have to do is from this website, just basically copy and paste the prompts in, and I'll explain what's happening as we go. Okay. I think we are good to go. I'll give everyone one more second just to like look around. I would say orient yourself just around kind of what is in here. We have some templates that we're going to work with. These are all new files. We have some research. If we look at these, our manager gave us just these like long. He had done some user research with teaching assistants and with professors, but he never really had time to go back to it. So we just have these really long transcripts. So all of this stuff is kind of just the mess that our manager gave us, and now we're going to start going through it with Claude Code. Okay, let's continue. So we already did our first command. We asked for the company overview. So now what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and do our first kind of like really awesome thing with Claude Code. So earlier I showed you that we could do the at command on a single file, and we did that with the company overview. Instead of doing it with just one file, you can actually reference and have Claude look at an entire folder. So we have that research folder with all of these different markdowns. What we can say is we can tell Claude to read that entire folder and then summarize kind of the top 3 pain points across all of this research. So I'm going to just use this exact command, read. I'm going to type them out so it goes a little bit slower so everyone has time to catch up, but you can always just click this copy button and copy them in. So read all the files in research and tell me the top 3 pain points. Okay, so very predictably, this is going to go ahead and just read all those files. And then what we can also do in Claude Code is we can also have it create files. So we're going to say, save the synthesis to this document, user research synthesis. Save as user research synthesis. You don't necessarily have to say what you want it to be saved as. If you don't give it a name, then Claude will just choose a name, and usually it will make sense. But in this case, I'm just going to be very explicit so that we have it for the rest of the lesson. All right, so what is happening here? We see that Claude is doing stuff. It is reading all of these files all at the same time. If you think about what this would take to do if you were in like chatgpt.com, for example, then you would have to have all these transcripts as different files or like one big file, copy and paste that in or drag all those files in. And then what's interesting about the way that Claude is doing this here is it is not just kind of having one huge context window and just looking at all of these at the same time. What Claude has actually done here is it has spun up a bunch of like sub agents of itself. So this is kind of like one area where you hear that Claude is agentic or Claude Code is agentic, is it is like basically using a tool to read all of these individually instead of doing it all at once, and then it will put it all together. So Claude is very smart just at kind of knowing how to use itself to be smart. So the main Claude has made a bunch of sub instances of itself to read all of these, and we see that it's made itself a little to-do list here. So it's reading all 12 interview files from the research directory, and then it's going to analyze and identify the top 3 pain points, and then it will create the user research synthesis and findings. So what's really cool is that Claude will really is very good at making a plan and then kind of knowing itself if it has done that plan and then actually kind of like executing against it. And that's one of the things that makes Claude just so good at actually following instructions is that it's very good at making its own plans.
All
Okay.
right. Real quick, for everyone, I think we're getting some pings that the screen is a little bit hard to
Oh,
see. You can either zoom in. I
let
assume
me
you
make
need
things bigger.
multiple terminals here. You can also zoom in on that particular window screen to be able to see it more clearly.
Yes, thank you for the note. Okay, I made everything way bigger.
Okay.
Maybe that might be a bit too big.
Oh,
Okay.
I see lots of heart emojis. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate letting me know. I'm not monitoring the chat too much, so if there's anything like that, please feel free to just go ahead and let me know. Um, okay. So recapping quickly, we saw all these little read things that it launched, and then it will go ahead and use its write tool. And then after you do this, it'll ask you, is it allowed to make this change? So that's another thing that kind of like keeps it from doing like too much stuff that you don't want it to do. Here, I'm going to go ahead and just say yes, allow all edits. If you wanted to be more careful, you could do one at a time, but it's kind of nice to just give it a little bit more power. We're in a really safe folder here, so I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, allow all edits. All right, so now we have this new folder file that was just created, and I'll go ahead and right-click, open preview so we can see it better. So now we have this nice document with kind of like all of the things that we just asked for. So it has the top 3 pain points, and then just because it's helpful for the overall story, the main 3 are that there's lack of visibility in the grading. So different teaching assistants are grading with totally different like barometers. They're not very well calibrated against each other. So students always want to be in the TAs who are grading more easily. There's no early warning system. So if TAs are starting to fall behind, there's no way for the professor to know. And there's not enough training support. So TAs aren't getting trained enough. So we just started this company. There's all this research that's just been sitting around. And right away, we are able to see some of the top 3 pain points from that research. Okay, and then what we just saw is we saw Claude was able to read an entire folder and then also create a new file for us. Okay, so let's kind of continue here. Let's say that now we want to take this file that we just created, this user research synthesis, and we want to actually, how does this, what we've learned, we have this document that our manager gave us called Q1 goals, which is kind of like what overall is the company working on? Are the goals that the company has actually aligned with the research that we just did? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clear. So we start a new chat. So that just restarts us. And then I'm going to say, based on Q1 goals, so that document, and this other document that we just created, write a summary of what I've learned. Summary of what I've learned. And then we'll call it Learning Summary MD. So this is kind of like, okay, we're going to tell our manager, I've reviewed the research, I've looked at our goals, and here's where I think we're at. What's cool about this is that we have this Q1 goals document that we can just reference at any time with Claude Code. So if you imagine like normally when you're working with an LLM, you want to say, okay, we have this research, we have this document, but then maybe your Q1 goals lives like in some like Confluence page or some deck somewhere. Then now you have to sort of maybe like what I would normally do is I would just type like, okay, hey, here's our user research synthesis. Here are our goals. But it wouldn't necessarily be like the full goals. Whereas here, when we have this document that is just in our system that we can reference whenever we want, it's really easy to kind of match up and just give that LLM really good context. Because this Q1 goals document, it's very thorough. It has all of our goals and our risks. And of course, this could be more detailed if you wanted. And so because we have this as like a static document that we can refer to whenever we want, using this at symbol and with Claude Code, we can just easily provide that context right away in a way that you really can't do in any sort of browser-based tool. Okay, so it created learning summary for us, which basically is going to say, hey, okay, here's what we found in the research. Does it actually match? And what we're finding here is that certain things that we want to do in our goals are very well aligned, but certain things that we want to do are actually not very well aligned. Like one of our major goals, if we look in Q1 goals, is to build an AI feedback assistant. When we actually look at all of the research, there's nobody that's really asking for AI tools. Really, there's a lot of other things that we need to fix beforehand, this is probably kind of a common thing is that if you're going to build a tool that uses AI, you need to make sure that it's actually solving the right problems and isn't just kind of like slapped on there. Okay, so now we have this learning summary, and we've now seen how we can use this static document and then something that we created to create a brand new document. Okay, so moving on to the next step. Our manager, we just remembered, we just asked Claude to say, hey, can you go ahead and can you just make this document for us? and we didn't really tell it how we wanted the document to be made. And so Claude, it has like an idea of how these documents should be created, and it's a good writer on its own. But this might not be at all the format that we actually want, and maybe within these sections, it doesn't actually have the things that we need. So it's decided that it should add like how validated are these things. We didn't ask for that. Claude just kind of decided that that was something that it should do. And normally when you're working at a company for your PRDs and for your one pagers, you probably already have templates. And so another thing that's really powerful you can do with Claude Code is we have these templates folder. And this is another thing that you can just sort of create once and put into your system. And now we have these different templates for all these different types of sort of information that we want to present in a specific way. And then we can also add rules for Claude so that when it is creating this template, it has an idea of what should actually go in there. So here we're going to use the manager had their one pager template. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tell Claude to take that document that it just created, the learning summary, and instead of just having it be in its own format, we're going to have it put it into the format that we actually want it to be in. So we're moving on to 1.4 here. So put learning summary into the format from one pager. Learning summary into the format of one pager. And then we're going to call it the one pager learning summary. One pager learning summary. So again, this is just kind of showing how when you have these files that exist kind of like already in your system, it's really easy for you to just combine and mix and match them in any way that you want. And the other thing that's cool here is that because we have these as like documents that are already in here and we aren't every single time typing them from scratch, we can easily update them so that the next time we run any of these commands or we want to do any of these things, we can just update this in one spot. Let's say that our one pager template, we got some feedback that certain sections weren't clear, or we've been noticing that people are really getting confused at a certain part. Within that section, you could add some bullets for rules so that next time Claude you need to write a one pager with Claude, it will have those rules. And now you have that saved forever. And it's not something that you have to remember each time. So this is just another way that you can continually improve and build out your system by having these documents in here and then iterating on them over time. Okay, so we have our one pager learning summary here. I'm going to go ahead and find that on the side here. Okay, great. So now we have that same type of thing that we just had before, but this is a much better format. Like if your manager was expecting this to see it in a specific format and then you came up with this completely other format, you know how managers can be. They might be like, oh, this isn't how I want it, or I can't comprehend this. So now what we see is in key insights, grading consistency is the number one pain point. Workload issues are discovered too late. So this is a little bit more comprehensive or a little bit more like kind of easy to view than the one that we had before. And so now we have a specific recommendation of which goals from the company goals should we focus on, and then what else could we do. Of course, throughout this whole process, you'd want to like really make sure you carefully read anything before you send to your manager. And we're going to talk soon about how you can kind of be a little bit more of a partner in this process with the AI. But this is just showing how can you use templates to kind of transform information from one type into another type. Okay, so now let's say that we read this and we're going through and we're actually one reason we don't feel great about sending this to our manager is that AI usage in the workplace, of course, is becoming more standard, but you never wanted to just see like, oh, if there's too much AI writing, and honestly, but here's the thing, or stuff like that, then it just really reads as AI and people are getting much, much better at that. And maybe it's just really not written in your style or it doesn't sound like AI. Another very similar thing that you can do to a template is you can also have a prompt that says, okay, here is my writing style. So this is how I like to write. Here are the rules for Carl's writing. You can create a writing style document. And now we're going to do one more transformation of this document that we just made. And we're going to say, rewrite the one pager learning summary using my writing style. Rewrite one pager learning summary in the style of writing style. And then we're going to call it okay. So in this case, so far what we've seen is we've mostly just had Claude create new documents. Here, what we're actually doing is we're having it edit a document, and which is another thing, of course, that you can do with Claude. So we're saying, go into the document that you just made, this one-pager learning summary, which we like the format better, but actually update it so that it is following the rules of writing style. So what we can see over here is it's kind of showing us like the exact changes that it's making. So we can see just some small things. It'll give us a summary at the end of all the changes that it made. But really what it's doing is it's making it sound, in this case, more like my writing style. What's cool here is that like when you're on social media or you're seeing all these different prompt databases and stuff like that, prompts can be very hard to just use and manage. Like you might see a really great one when you're on Twitter or you're on LinkedIn, but what do you actually do with it? Most people don't really have like a great organization system for how they are actually going to figure out how to use these prompts. What's awesome is that if you have like kind of here I have it in templates, but you could also have a folder called prompts. You could have those prompts so that whenever you want to reference one, you can just say, hey, please use this prompt on this document, or hey, use this prompt to help me think through this, depending on what the prompt is. And so this is another way where you can just have those things stored in your system, and then you can use them really easily whenever you want. Just pull them in and kind of point Claude to them. And so it's a great way to actually use all those prompts. And one thing that I found is very interesting is that I feel like early AI days was all about prompting, and now we've kind of like moved up a couple layers into like the agentic and like building agent systems. But what still really matters is writing good prompts. Like I'm still very amazed when I use like one of those like really big prompts, because I think a lot of times I'll just kind of like raw ask the LLM to do something and the output seems good. But if you have really good prompts that are very detailed, you can actually get much, much better outputs. And so this is just another way where you can work with AI a lot more effectively by storing those prompts. Okay, so now we have our kind of final version of this document here. We have gone through a couple steps here. Now it sounds like a human. It's really well written. And Claude Code is kind of explaining all the different changes that it made here. So it took out some of the jargon, use active voice, just stuff that makes the writing better. Okay, so now we are happy with this document. Let's just go ahead and look at that in a more nice way. We've sent it to our manager, and he says, good to go. Please go ahead and update the teams on kind of like what you found and what you think we should do. So normally what you would do here is you would, let's say you needed to send an email to execs, you needed to send a Slack message to your team, and then you also kind of wanted to just start building out like your own, maybe you have like an own internal wiki for where you store these types of documents. Normally you'd have to go through and manually write each of those, or if you're using AI, you could say, hey, please write a Slack message with this. Hey, please help me write an email with this. Make sure it has like a specific ask for executives. Help me write the company wiki. But the kind of thing to really tie this all home or bring this all home is we can do all of that at the same time. So what we have here is we have a Slack template. Again, this is sort of has like all of the rules that we want to make sure that it follows, and something that we can update over time. We have a email template and we have a company wiki. And what we're going to do is we're going to have Claude do all three of those transformations all at the same time. So if you're following along, we are in 1.6 here. So we're going to say, take this document that we made and create three. I'll make this bigger as well for everyone. Take this document that we made and then transform it into all three ways, all at the same time. So take one-pager learning summary and put it into these formats. And then pro tip here, if you hit Control Enter, you can make, one thing I actually meant to show earlier. So if you ever make a mistake, so right now what I just realized is I hit enter too early. And so Claude just started. You can always interrupt Claude and just stop it because sometimes it can be a bit slow. If you hit the escape key, that will stop it from working. And then another kind of good tip to know here is if you hit escape twice, then you can rewind. And this lets you go back to any point like in that conversation that you've had, so that if you don't like what it just did, if you put a prompt that was actually not the right prompt and you want to go back and try again, you can hit escape twice and then scroll back. Or if you realize that it did something that you like, it really did not follow your instructions and it edited a document in a way that you don't like, you can rewind back to that one. And then you have this option to restore code and conversation. Of course, here code really just means the file. That would actually undo whatever it just did and just put you back to where you were before. So another thing that is pretty hard to do in maybe most browser LLMs can do this, but this is just a nice way to like know how to use Claude Code is you can always go back or you can always interrupt it as it goes. So for me, I'm not going to rewrite anything. I'm just going to go back and restore this. Okay, so so if you do Shift Enter, so my computer's being a bit weird. Normally, if you do Control, sorry, it's actually on a Mac, it's Option Enter will make a new line. So we're gonna have it put it into these three formats of the company wiki. Nope, that's the wrong one. The email summary and the Slack update. So Claude is getting context on what all of these things are, and then it's going to take this document that, again, we've taken a couple steps to get it to this point where we really like it. We like the writing. Our manager has approved it. And now we can do all of this at once. And just to really hammer this point home, and because I'm going to reference this a couple different times, is that all of these things, they just live in our system here. So every time we want to do this, it's really easy for us to refer back to it. And then again, if we got feedback or if we see the actual output isn't what we actually want, maybe for these key points, we have like more specific rules that we want Claude to follow, or for the one-line summary, we have like specific instructions on how we want that to be written. You can just update the summary document or the summary template, so that anytime in the future that you're working with Claude Code, you can just point to that thing and it will do it in the much better way. And these can have a lot of rules in them so that the output is just much closer to what you actually want. And so it's a way that you can go from just having the LLM just trusting it to do what you want, which sometimes works, but oftentimes you end up having to edit a lot, to getting first pass outputs that are much closer to what you are actually hoping for. Okay, so to kind of round this section out, we now have our three versions. We have our Slack update, which we could then edit and send to our teams. We have our stakeholder update, which is the other format and has kind of like this own format, the timeline, resource, all that stuff. And then we have our like overall wiki here that we would post onto our internal wiki. Okay, so this is really, we're kind of getting through like most of the main types of things that you can do just with files in Claude. And one thing that's good to know is that there's all these other fancy Claude features, and we'll talk about some of them today. There's slash commands, and there's skills, and there's all these other things that you'll see when you're learning about Claude Code. Ultimately, everything is it's really just a markdown file with text. So all those rules, all the skills, all they are just these types of markdown files that just have rules in them that are different ways for Claude to basically see those rules and then do something with them. So this stuff, and we've done a bunch of different examples here, really is the core of what Claude Code can do for non-technical uses. It's just a really great way to have these files and combine and mix and match them in all these different ways. And what's really awesome is kind of going into 1.7 here, is what we just did is we had a full like set of steps that we just did. We started with our research, and then we synthesized it into a document, and then we put it into a one-pager, and then we put it into our writing style, and then we had this sort of final transformation where we put it out into all these different formats. That is a workflow and with specific steps. And so what you can do as you kind of get better at using Claude Code is you can build out your own workflows, and then you can have a document that just explains that entire workflow. So here we have this other document called workflow that shows, okay, all the steps that I just talked about: synthesize, summarize, format, humanize, and then distribute. And so what you could do is right here, we've really been in the loop at every single step of saying, okay, first do this, then do this, then do this. But you can build out these workflows where let's say next time you had research and you wanted to go through this whole process, you could just say, hey, Claude, run this workflow, which is onboarding to update, on this research folder. And then instead of us having to be there and do every single step, it will actually just use all the different parts of our system to just execute across all those steps. And this is just very useful for like any type of thing where you have multiple steps. You can create another sort of like workflow document that has all those rules, and Claude will go through, and as it reads it, you don't have to have all of those files. Like we have we have all those files in here that we've used throughout, like the different templates and things like that. And then if you update that template, then when you run the workflow the next time, it will use the updated one. So it's like, this is where it kind of starts to feel a little bit engineering, where yes, we are just working with documents, but we can actually kind of be very systematic around how we do it. And it's not code, but it is kind of like a systems thinking around how should Claude Code use all these files and how can we set it up so that next time it can do all of it much more quickly. So, of course, there is like a kind of a setup here that takes some time to get all these documents in here the first time. But once you have it and you're building out your system, that initial investment that you make really pays itself off quickly for basically all future tasks that you have to do if you're ever doing the same thing, again. Okay, so we are officially ready to move on to our next part of the session, where we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually take all of our learnings that we've now distributed across the company. And our manager had asked for a prototype by the end of the week, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a pretty good prototype that solves the problems that we found in the user research right now in just a few steps. But instead of just saying, hey, Claude, here is the user research, can you make something that solves this problem? Then who knows what output you're going to get. You're totally not involved in that process. I'll show you how can we actually work with Claude Code to go through this process and really have it think with us. And I'll show you some really cool tools here. So the next one that we're going to use is this awesome tool called Ask User Questions. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and clear. And now we're starting we're kind of back to the beginning of a new Claude session here. We are going to go ahead and say, based on the user research synthesis that we did and our Q1 goals, create a one-page requirements doc for our TA workload tracker. So if you remember kind of some of the earlier issues that we discovered was that it was really hard for professors to have any kind of overview into like how their teaching assistants were grading, and they're grading really inconsistently. What we're going to do is we're going to build something that helps view all that work. But what we're going to do here, and the cool thing that we haven't seen yet, is we're going to have Claude use this really cool tool called Ask User Questions that will actually interview us about what it needs to know to write these requirements. So this one's a bit long, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and then paste it in, and you can do the same. So now what it will do is it will look at that user research that we did earlier and then our Q1 goals, and it's going to help us write a new requirements that we can use to prototype. But again, we've given it like really not enough information here at all to actually write that. So what it's going to do is it's going to think through, okay, what do I need to know? What is important? Like, who is the user? What are the kind of main requirements? Like right here, it's asking who is the primary user. I'm going to go ahead and just do this quickly. If you want to follow along after, once I submit all my answers, it will take a second to do the requirements. If you're following along, you can do whatever answers you want here as well. But again, what's happened here is it's basically giving us like options, which is nice. So instead of just having it ask, it's kind of making suggestions around what the options or answers could be. And oftentimes these are pretty good. And then if you don't want to actually accept any of these, you can always just type like, oh, these are actually all wrong. It's for students as well, for example, is something we could put. So I'm just going to go ahead and make some selections here. In addition to sort of like giving you a couple options, having you select one, it will also sometimes give you like multiple selection. So this is just like a really amazing like UI for this type of experience. Okay, so I'm not paying super close attention to exactly what I'm doing here, but all of these requirements now are going to be going into that final requirements document. Okay, and then so it asks us some questions, but it's still thinking. It's like, okay, now I've asked those questions, but I still have more questions around like all the different things. What level of detail? How should we handle the current stigma around issues? So this is something from the research where students don't really, TAs have a hard time asking for help. So what is a way that we can make it easier for TAs? So it's actually giving us some like nice options here. Okay. I think it might ask one more round of questions, or it might be happy with where it's at now. Okay, it's asking us more questions. I've seen these examples where sometimes it will literally ask you like 67 questions. In this case, I asked it to ask me a lot of questions. It's good. It's good. Like the AI asking you questions is actually exactly what you want because it gives you just so much more control over the output. Anything that it doesn't ask, it's making an assumption, and you can't always trust the AI to make good assumptions. And I think that when people like are having trouble working with AI or they feel like everything that they create, they end up having to edit all of it, so it doesn't actually save them any time. It's usually because of the assumptions and things that AI has done where the person wasn't involved. And so using this ask user questions tool gets you really like in the loop so that you are actually like directly involved in all that stuff. So it is still working here. And it's kind of summarized like what is the final thing that we decided to end up building here. Um, so workload dashboard, early warning alerts, an anonymous I need help button. Professors can outreach. Professors can outreach proactively, and then it'll give us estimated hours. So these are things that in the real world you probably would want to read them more, and you'd have some ideas from your designer and those conversations to sort of like how to actually do this. But again, it kind of ends up getting put into this really nice requirements document. Okay, but we are still not ready to say, hey, go build this. Because oftentimes when you are creating these types of documents, and what we're going to look at next really applies to any type of document that you're making, you may really want to, you make sure that you're getting some other perspectives. So in the real world, you're a product manager, you write your PRD, and then you send it out and you get feedback from a bunch of different people. And it's pretty possible that there are just like types of questions, like maybe there's requirements that you didn't really fully think through, or there's parts of the user experience that designers are going to be care about more, or there's executives at your company that are going to be really caring about like what exactly is the timeline and what exactly is the impact here, which are all things that you can try to think through, but it can often be helpful to kind of get a second pass or another look at anything that you're creating before you actually kind of go and build it. And so I'll show you another nice technique here is in our templates folder, we have a couple different personas. So there we have a busy executive, we have a skeptical engineer, and we have a UX designer. And so these are basically like files that say, how does this type of person think about these types of problems? So we have our busy executive kind of has created a persona for her, each one of these. And what we can do is we can say, please review the requirements that we just made from all these perspectives. And what this will do is it will kind of, and if you're working at a company and you know that there's certain types of questions, you could even model these after like real people at your actual company and the types of questions that they ask. This helps you catch those types of questions and figure out how to think through them before you're ever actually giving it to a human. So this is like just another good way to really involve AI in the process to actually help it review your document from a bunch of different angles. So that is our 1.9 prompt here. So we're going to say, please review the requirements document that we just made from these three perspectives and then create a new document for that. Okay, so it's reviewing it and then it knows that it has these files in the system. One thing that Claude is really good at doing is, so I didn't, since I just copied it from here and pasted it, it didn't have like the full file path to each of these. So when it first tried to read them, it had an error. But Claude is like pretty good at fixing itself, which is one of the most awesome things about Claude Code is that you can give it a task, and if it gets stuck, it will think. So it's like, okay, well, that wasn't the exact right path, but maybe the stars just kind of mean like it's somewhere in the name of the file is the word engineer. Let me see if that helps me find it. And then it was able to find them. So just kind of another sort of example of how Claude Code in this system is just very smart and can kind of keep going forward on its own. Okay, so it's thinking, it's osmosising, and it is going to go ahead and help us get this document from the perspective of all these people. And then what we'll do next is we'll use the Ask User Questions tool again to help us process that feedback. And I'll show you a couple other ways that if you have a long document that you need to kind of like think through or work with Claude, I'll show you a couple of other tips as well. Okay, how are we doing? How's everybody feeling? I know there is a lot that we are covering, and I am really trying to get us to the end of this session and feel like a pro. Anything in the chat to cover, Jennifer?
Oh, I see lots of emojis. It is a lot to cover. So I'll preface this with one, we will be sending the recording out by the end of the week, so don't worry. And then two, we're also, for some of the questions I've been resolving on the side. So we'll also be sharing out links, docs, so you can follow along.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, perfect timing. We now have our kind of big consolidated document here, rec review TA dash. One thing I'll also say is at the very end of the session, right now, all these files are just kind of like going into the side here. So it's getting harder and harder to find them. There are some good ways that you can actually set up your system so that things are going in like project folders and stuff like that. And that's the last thing we'll review. Okay, so we have all of these things that have just come through. We have our engineering review. What are their major concerns? So they're worried that the calculation is underspecified, which is probably fair. In the document, it just says based on historical time per assignment, but this doesn't explain where does the average come from. So again, this is an example of where we actually kind of maybe, use AI and we put this and it makes sense to us, but when we actually get another perspective on it, it's not as clear. So this is just a really good way to make sure that your requirements and everything is like really well thought through. So again, we have a long document here. In the real world, you would probably want to actually read through it. The main way that we're going to go through is we're going to go ahead and say ask user questions tool to help us review this. One thing that I like to do, another way, if you have one of these types of documents and you have like a lot of stuff that you want to address, is you can actually just go into the document. And we haven't actually really like edited documents directly in this session, but of course you can always just like edit anything directly here that you want. But what we can do is you can also just choose some kind of like character combination. I like using these double brackets and say, you can just give feedback. Like, let's skip these. Or for example, like these are really important, really important. What do you think? And then what you can do is you can tell Claude, hey, I have just left a bunch of comments in these double brackets. Can you like look through them and then help me think through them and then edit the document with the clarification? So that's one way where if you don't want to just like have to like copy and paste like, hey, with this section, what should we do? With this section, what should we do? You can put it in, and you can use any character combination you want, just anything that will make it obvious to the LLM that it is separate from the main text to kind of review that. Okay, but we're not going to actually do that for now. What we're going to do is we're just going to do this last prompt. We're going to say, use your Ask User Questions tool to help me walk through the feedback. So what this will do is it will do the same kind of UI that we saw before when it was asking us questions about the requirements, but instead it will do that with this. So the Ask User Questions tool is relatively new. I think it came out maybe like a month ago, but it is amazing. Like it is one of the just like coolest LLM features I think I've seen in really bringing you into the process. And so I'm giving us another example just to show you another way that you can use it. I personally use it a lot. Almost at any point when you're like, there's lots of different creative ways to use it. Like, okay, I finished this document. What are some areas that like I might not have considered? Use your Ask User Questions tool. Okay, so it's asking us, it's kind of going through all the feedback here. I think it'll go through one by one of the personas. Again, when you do this on your own, it's kind of fun. All the answers that you do here will actually end up being put into the requirements. So just to kind of keep us on track here, I'm going a little bit fast. But it is cool how all of these things are actually going to be updated in the requirements and then used in that final build. Okay. So I'm just making choices here. So far we've answered the exec and I think the engineer and the designer, and then the last one will be the exec. So again, it's reading requirements. It knows where the feedback is. It's photosynthesizing. Oh, great. Actually, it already asked everything. All right. So now it's also updating the version of the document. And yeah, we will now have these like really nice requirements that is just so much better. Like we had that initial research and maybe we had our ideas of our own of like the initial requirements, but now we have this requirements document where it asked us like 15 questions. We had it reviewed from a bunch of perspectives. We answered like another 10 questions. So by the time we get to this final requirements document, it's actually quite good. And there's still one more step we're going to do to make it really good before we actually move on to the final prototyping step. And this is just another area where, with your own system at home that you're building out for your own work, you can really mix and match and kind of combine all these in different ways. If you wanted more or less personas, if you wanted it to be reviewed with one of those prompts that you found online, any of those types of things, or you've come up with your own prompt that you find works really well. Those are things that you can save into your system and then just easily refer to anytime you want to do this type of stuff. And the best way to do it is really just working in the tool will teach you like what's working and what's not. And you really quickly, like once you start doing this, you kind of get to the point where using Claude, like, or any LLM outside of Claude code feels just it feels terrible because there's all this information you want to be able to give it, but you can't. It feels like it's like this total stranger. Whereas when you have the Claude Code with your own setup, it almost feels like an actual coworker, and that's kind of what we're kind of see recently. I always thought it was very interesting that Anthropic came out with their new tool, and I always thought that they were going to call. So there's Claude Code, and then Anthropic just came out with Claude Cowork, which is kind of like a less technical version that can do some of this stuff. I would say it's definitely not as powerful. If you want to like really be able to do most of this stuff, you couldn't do it in Claude Cowork. I always thought they were going to call it Claude Agent because I knew that product would come at some point. But Cowork, I think, is maybe even a better name because as you can see, it's like really it's almost like an LLM that actually has like full context in everything, much more like a coworker than just sort of like a blank LLM. Okay, yay! We're almost there, everyone. We have this really nice requirements. We have all these updates. The last thing I'm going to show you in terms of just like this demo is we're going to use plan mode, which is the last thing we haven't talked about so far. We've just put stuff in, and then Claude has just done the stuff directly. And sometimes it will make a plan and show us, but it's not really like actively making a plan first. So if you hit Shift Tab, then that will put you into plan mode. And what this does is this makes it so that Claude literally is totally unable to edit any files. I think one thing, if you've ever worked with like, if Claude Code or if you've been in Cursor using AI, a lot of times you'll say, hey, how does this work? Or it's like, hey, is there a bug here? And then it'll say, oh yeah, there is a bug. Let me fix it. But maybe it's not going to fix it in the way that you want. Plan mode makes it so that it can read files, but it actually can't edit them at all. So it actually has to plan. So we're going to switch into plan mode, and then we're going to do our final thing before we actually have it build. So we're going to say switch to plan mode. Okay, so we're going to say, please build. So please, one other thing I'll call out here. So one issue that many people, like if you've ever prototyped with AI before, is if you're presenting it at your own company, it's hard to kind of get it to look like the things that you have at your company. So you have this new tool, but it doesn't, or this prototype, but it doesn't really look like whatever your actual app or company's product looks like. One way that you can kind of help solve that is you can create like a brand guidelines that walks through like what are all the colors at this company, what's the typography, how does the scale work? And this is something where usually if you just like show Claude whatever your brand is, or most companies will actually have brand guidelines like of how things are built or how things are supposed to look. If you give that context to the LLM, then when it actually goes to create the prototype, it will use that instead of just kind of doing it on its own. Okay, so I had interrupted it here, so let's go back. And again, we're in plan mode. And so what it is doing here is it is looking at the brand guidelines, it's looking at the requirements, and it is going to go ahead and create a plan for us before it actually does any implementation. And what's nice here is that this will let us see a check, like kind of a list of what its plan is to build this before we start. So we can look and say, okay, actually, like I don't want that requirement, or make sure that you output it as this type of file, or you actually do need to make sure you use make sure it's mobile optimized, for example. And then one other thing that I did to make this prototype just kind of like work really nicely, and for most prototyping, this is totally fine, is I said, just basically make it a web app. Use HTML, use CSS, and then JavaScript so that I can actually click around. It would probably do that on its own, but it's good just to call it out to know like that it will work in your browser. All right, so then it's reviewed everything. It understands the design, it understands the implementation, and now it's come up with a final plan. Here is Claude's plan. So prototype, overview, and this is something where you would read it, and then if it looks good, it's long, which is good because we've been through a couple of steps here. You can say, yes, that looks good. Or if there's something that looks wrong, this is very much like the ask user questions tool. You can say like what you want it to be different. So here I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, and then accept edits. And in a few minutes, we will have a nice prototype for faculty products. One kind of, we'll get to the questions very soon here. One thing that is really awesome, and you'll see this a lot when you really start to work with Claude Code. So now we have these like five steps, and then it will test it. Well, what do we do? You know, it's kind of like a funny amount of time. It's like, okay, we probably have like 5 or 10 minutes while Claude is working on this session. What should we do? Well, if you want, you can always just make a new terminal. And again, now we're down in this new terminal, and we can just start Claude again. So now we have this other Claude session that's running, and it's doing the thing that we want. But now we have another Claude, and we can like say hello. And this Claude can be doing completely other stuff. So sometimes this is like a really nice way to multi-Claude, or you can be very productive if you. I would personally say it's very, very, very hard to manage. More than two is like almost impossible. But you'll see all these setups with like engineers who have like 50 different Claudes up, and each one's like working on different things. And the coordination of those all those things is kind of where you start to see these like crazy agent setups. But that's one thing that's nice is that you can always kind of easily have multiple Claudes going. So you can ask like multiple questions, or if you don't really need to see this right away, you could start it and then go work on something else and check on it later. Okay, so the last thing that I'll cover for today before we kind of conclude and move to questions is you're probably wondering, okay, so we have all of these like files and things in here. The two biggest questions that people ask are one, how do I get my own like files and stuff like that? How do I actually like make this happen for myself? And then the other question is, what is like a good setup for my own system that I want to build out over time and use? So the main two answers for that, one is that you've probably heard of MCPs. So an MCP is a multi-context protocol. I think I need to double check myself, but that basically is a way that lets LLMs talk to almost like any product. And so most major products now, like anything that you're using, like Notion or Google Drive or Confluence, anything like that, they all have their own MCPs. Yeah, model context protocol, which is just a way that if it's a really kind of like pre-built way for LLMs to be able to interact with other things. And so if you set these up, then you can pull files in from any of these places, and then you can also push files back out. So this is just a really nice way to like actually build out your system with your own documents. Different companies will have different rules around like which ones you're allowed to use, so you'll have to see. I'll just demo this really quickly. If you've ever used a product called Linear, it's basically like a newer, kind of nicer Jira. It's really, really easy to add MCPs. You almost always just Google like company MCP. And these days, because so many more people are using agents, almost every company will have an MCP. So for example, here is Linear's MCP page, and they have a really nice, just kind of like one line command. So I'm just going to copy this command, and we'll clear just to have a new session. Please help me set up this MCP. So we're just going to use this command that we got from Linear. And almost all the time, like some of these might feel a little bit more technical. For example, if we go to the Google Workspace one, there are more steps that you have to do to make this work. You can almost always just say, copy this, and then paste it into Claude and say, hey, help me set this up. And it will walk through all those steps with you. Okay, so what we're seeing is that Claude is running that command to add Linear into our project. Just making sure it works. Okay, it's now connected. Let me see. Sometimes you have to restart. Yeah, so usually when you add an MCP, you have to restart. I'll show you another pro move here is you can type exit to leave. And then we're going to start Claude again. And then if you ever want to go back to a session from before, /resume will let you see any of those conversations. These are all the ones that we've had today. So even though we had to leave Claude, we can still pick it back up. So now when we do /MCP, we see Linear is connected here. And so now what I'll show you something really cool, because this will kind of like take us out of just being in our own kind of system here and show you what does it look like if we actually push this stuff out. So I'm going to say, please create a new project in Linear and create tickets for all of these requirements. And we'll come back to that in a second. So what I've done is I basically, we have all these requirements. Let's say that instead of having Claude build it, you wanted to like make tickets for your engineers to build it. It's now going to use that MCP. to create this thing. So it's going to do that. Okay, so right now we are multi-clotting a little bit to kind of get us to the end here. So back to our prototype. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up here. Back to our prototype. It is finished, and let's see how it turned out. It also was able to just automatically open that into our system. Okay, so again, we didn't like super thoroughly look at those requirements from earlier, but what we can see here is we have like a pretty nice dashboard, and it actually basically works. And of course, we aren't connected to a backend or anything here, but we do have something that is like a pretty nice prototype. We can sort it by different things, sort by status. We're seeing these options. One of the things was that TAs don't have any way for like to get help. So as a professor, we can click this button and it will actually kind of give us an option. It's telling us what would happen in a real app. And we have this TA viewed. So this is what TAs see is like they can keep track of their own work. They have this button that says I need help that they can send to the professor. And then the professor in their view, they can see when people are experiencing high workload or things like that. So again, and again, because we gave it our design system, it's actually using like the design system of faculty products. So this based on all those requirements and things that we did, this is a pretty nice prototype that we could then share. We could like do a screen grab or we could send that file over and anyone could open this up on their own computer and then they could see this as well. So that just kind of takes us through the whole prototyping flow because that's something that everyone also wants to know how to do with Claude Code. And this is a pretty good first pass. And of course, you could always ask Claude like, oh, I actually want to make sure that these are bolded or here the logic of this isn't how I expected or we need to add different statuses. All of those types of changes. Now you have that loop that you can just kind of continue to update with Claude now that it has that stuff in here. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. And I also just wanted to call out, and we'll go into Q&A soon, but I also want to thank everybody for helping each other out for some of the questions on Slido.
Yes. Okay. So I will say, I think this is probably a good place for us to go ahead and move on to the last thing. I will show you once it makes these Jira tickets, we'll jump over to there. The last thing I'll just cover. So we didn't have time to get to it today. The other main question that people often have is like, how can you actually sort of like build out your own system here? This last section, if you go to 2, it shows you how to make commands, how you can build your own command. And then kind of the final thing that the biggest question people have is how can you set up your own workplace structure? I have here at the very end, you can download what it would look like for the example that we went through today. Or if you want to have a blank version for your own, then you can also use that on your own. But basically, you want to just figure out how can you split up things like meetings, projects, templates. How can you build out your kind of own file structure so that as you work, it doesn't sort of get all disorganized like this. And then it just puts things into the places that you want so it can kind of stay clean. Okay. I think that basically takes us through everything. If this finishes, we'll jump over to that. But that was a lot. We covered a lot. If you're able to do everything that we just covered on your own in Claude Code, then you are officially one of the top AI users of all product managers because you're still really way ahead of the curve. And this is just a ton of examples of how you can use Claude Code to combine all this stuff together. Okay.
Okay. Whew.
Cool.
Carl, any other tidbits?
Um, no, I think well, if the linear thing finishes in time, then I'll go ahead and share that. But otherwise, that kind of takes us through all the main stuff I wanted to cover for us today.
Okay, I seen lots of heart emojis. Everybody, usually I recommend folks can follow the recording at 2x speed. In this case, if you want, you can also pause the
Yeah.
recording as you go to follow along step by step. We've also sent out the website with instructions. Maya, if you can project for a bit before we get into Q&A, we know there's a bunch of questions in Q&A. We'll tackle as many as we can. Been trying to answer them offline. I wanted to highlight, as Carl said, this is a lot. And so this is also part of a broader curriculum with the AI Product Management Certification. It is the top highest rated Maven course with over 10,000 AI PMs. And what's great about this is it's a combination of content, learning the principles. What is AI? How do I build it? How do I think about it? As well as context, different group activities. We have executives, we have experts coming in to share, as well as an opportunity to really build something real with the capstone project. It's a broad community, over 10,000 alumni, as we mentioned. And with Carl, we are sharing a special promo code. So if you'd like to enroll, the promo code is Carl P500. If you're interested or you wanted to at least write it down, you get $500 off. Sale ends Sunday, January 25th. And it's a chance to really get supported with the community as well as from experts like Carl to be able to really get hands-on with AI. Okay, and as we've been mentioning on the chat, the full recording will be sent out later this week. And many of you have also been seeing the step-by-step instructions and helping each other out. So I love it. Okay. With that, Carl, are you ready for Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we'll project the questions. We've been tackling a few offline, and also huge kudos to everybody who's been also helping each other out. We're all learning together, so it's great. Folks can help each other. First question, and these are all anonymous. Why do you use Claude Code at all when you can do all of this in Cursor? Just wondering the benefits of having Claude Code and, in addition, Cursor. Cursor could do all of this using the Claude Code models, or you can use other models.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
this is a really good question. It's a very common question. So
Yeah.
I would say there's a couple reasons. One is so I use Cursor a lot for development, and Cursor is just it's much more optimized specifically for coding. And so like in the back end, there's like a bunch of like indexing and things like that. So even though it's the same models, what Claude Code and what Cursor are, what they're called is they're called harnesses. Um, Cursor as a harness is much more optimized for code. So I found that just like with writing outputs, it doesn't tend to be as good as Claude Code, which is a bit more general. Um, and the other thing I would say is that I really do think that Claude Code is better at handling like much longer tasks. So you can usually give the same thing to Cursor, but Cursor, like after a certain number of kind of like steps, will often kind of stop itself or will kind of go off the rails. Whereas with Claude Code, the harness is just really, really nicely designed where it can like really like it helps the LLM figure out how to solve its own problem so it can keep going forward. And then I would say that Claude Code is really just like kind of ahead of all the other companies in terms of their harness. Ends up being basically copied by the others. So you just get nice features like plan mode that was in Claude Code first. Ask user questions. I don't think any other model has yet. Maybe Cursor has, but Claude Code tends to just be kind of like at the forefront of this. And so that's why I find myself using it all the time. Although I will say I actually also do use Cursor for development. So and the last thing is that it kind of just depends. Like different people have different tools that they have available at their company. So I do have a Cursor course, and I think Cursor is amazing, and you can do a lot of this. But Claude Code is just my preferred for those reasons. Oh, one more thing is that Cursor actually can end up being very expensive because you buy the $20 per month pro plan on Cursor, but then you'll hit that limit pretty fast, and then you're paying for use. And so it's very easy for Cursor, even though it seems cheaper, to end up being like very expensive if you're especially if you're doing development. Whereas Claude Code for the $20 a month on the pro plan, it'll just reset those limits like every couple hours if you hit them. And so you get a lot more usage with Claude Code for the amount of money than you do with Cursor.
That's a good point. Okay, next question. All of my docs are in cloud, Google Drive, for example. How do I reference a folder in Google Drive or Dropbox? Or do all the files have to be local?
Yeah, great question. So in order to do the stuff that we were talking about here today, yeah, you do need the files to be local. What you can do though is if you set up the MCP where Claude Code can talk to those files, what it will do is it will pull those into your local system, and then when you make updates, it will push them back out. So you're kind of like you're not really working directly with them in Google Drive. You're working with them on your computer, and then it can push them back out to Google Drive. Specifically with Dropbox and Google Drive, the other thing that you can do is if you download the desktop app, so if you download like Google Drive for the desktop, then you can actually do all these exact things that we just showed, where you can open up Claude in your Google Drive folder from your desktop, and then you can reference files that way. Same with Dropbox. So that's a way that you can keep it synced and then also keep it local.
Okay.
Um,
Next question. When releasing production level software, how are you handling security audits, scalability constraints, and QA automated bug fixing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that for me, I have everything that I've like built, anything that you see that I built, like my fullstackpm.com or Claude Code for PMs or all of those things. Those are all, made with Claude Code. They aren't like they don't have like a super high level of sophistication, like maybe like a company's sort of production level software. You can for security audits, that's something that's like pretty solved. Like that is something where if you find like a good checklist, it's really not like a hard thing to do. So if you tell Claude to do it, um, and with like if you kind of have a good stack and you set up your stack well, where you're probably going to be using if you're less technical, then you want to choose something like Vercel for deployment because that's like really built for vibe coding. And then you want to use Supabase for your backend. These are like if you use like the common vibe code stack, the tools are really improving a lot for AI to be able to work with those tools and handle a lot of this for you. But it's still good to kind of like specifically check like, okay, for scalability, or sorry, for security, please run through this list. For scalability, please run through this. I will say that definitely if you are like completely don't know what's going on, there is some risk there. That's why at companies, I think they're usually still not letting PMs ship stuff to prod. You still need to have some review. So I would say you can do it. You for sure can do it, but you're going to have like a little bit more difficulty if you're not sure what's going on. But the tools are improving all the time.
Okay.
Grow. I love this question. Okay, so if you've actually used Cowork is just not as powerful as Cloud Code. I'm honestly a kind of a hater. Uh, and I think it's just because I started using Cloud Code first, but you cannot do like so much of the stuff that we talked about today, where you cannot at reference files. You can create artifacts, but you cannot like edit them in the editor. Like you get the artifact on the side and you can tell Claude to edit them, but you can't actually like click around. It can't like it can connect to some MCPs, and I'm sure that will improve. But like, I would say that there's a lot of reasons. Like, Cowork is um, a much weaker version of Cloud Code, so it can do some of this. And if you like are really don't want to use the terminal and things like that, then it's definitely an option. But you're just much better off if you can just get over that initial fear of the terminal and just get it to the point where you can type Claude and then it will do everything for you. You're much better off.
Okay, next question. Can Claude Code create rich media, images, flowcharts, diagrams, videos? If it can't, can it integrate with other models for this purpose?
Yes, great question. So it can create like mermaid diagrams. It can create like one thing that's really awesome is it can create like really nice slides if you tell it to build them in like HTML. It cannot actually natively create images, but what's cool is you can use, for example, like Nano Banana, the Gemini model, which is just makes amazing images. You can get if you get the API for that, then you can actually have Claude Code hit that API to make images for that. In my Cloud Code for PMs course, I think it's module 3, it goes through exactly how you can do that. So if it can do some of this like on its own, otherwise it can like hit an API that can do it for you. So you can, yeah, it can create text-based things on its own, and like website type of stuff. And then for videos and images, you can use an API to create those.
Okay, I think we could do a couple more questions. So next one from Nitin. All the data in the package is in MD files. In real life, can we use PDFs, PowerPoints, Word, etc.? Is MD necessary for all of this?
Yes, great question. So I will say one thing is that okay, so Claude Code can read PDFs and it can read all this stuff. And there is like a skill, which is something that we didn't cover, where it can create these types of documents. It's a little bit slower because each time it kind of has to like extract the information, get it into a format that it can understand, and then put it back out into that format. So like Markdown is kind of just a faster way. But you can, especially with PDFs, it can do those natively, and with the other types of things, it can read them. You just kind of have to have the skill, and it will like take some steps back and forth. Oftentimes, what is helpful to do is you kind of have like your working document in your Markdown file, and then when you actually need to like present it or you need to sort of put it into another format to share, then you'll use the skill to like package it into that. And I also do think that over time, these tools will probably get better at working with those types of files directly. But yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, last question. Practical question. Using Claude Code since a few weeks, since it's superb, but both in VS Code and Cursor, those smashed my pro limits super fast every day. Any idea how to not get to the limits?
Yes. Let me share my screen really quick. Okay, I think this is our last question anyway, so I'll share my screen. This is a common question. Um, okay, so one thing that you can do that is cool is if you do slash context, then it will show you like where is all of its context window actually getting taken up. And so certain things like I just turned on this MCP for linear, that's taking up like a lot of tokens. Sometimes you'll just have stuff loaded into Claude that you don't even realize. Like this isn't a lot of tokens, but I have all these plugins. So just check context, and then if there's stuff that's turned on, you can always turn it off. So that is helpful. And then the other thing I will honestly say, it's probably worth it to upgrade. If you're hitting the limits of the $20 a month for the pro plan like consistently, I personally I have so they have three plans. They have the $20 a month, they have $100 a month for 5x usage, and then they have the $200 a month for 20x usage. I am on the $100 a month plan, and I never hit limits with that. So if you're at the point where you're like consistently hitting those limits and you can get a sense that it might be worth it, I would say maybe just make the investment because you're getting a lot back for that additional money. And right now, like I think they've done these different like analyses and stuff. And for the amount of LLM usage that you get, Claude Code gives you more than any other tool. So I personally think if you're at that point, maybe just make the investment and see if it feels like it's worth it.
All right, everybody, if you've been following along, huge kudos, pat on the back. If not, don't worry. We will send out the full recording. You can do it step by step. There's also multiple links that we will be sending out where you can follow the instructions step by step as well. I do also want to highlight this is part of a broader curriculum of just learning by building. And so the AI product management certification, again, use the code Carl P500 for $500 off. It's the highest rated Maven course for those of you interested in really getting hands-on as well as learning about how to think and build an AI. This is a great course where you'll get the support, you'll get the materials, and you'll get the community. Okay, and we also have a special we'll be announcing soon. We're actually getting additional instructors with folks from Cursor and Anthropic to be joining the next cohort as well as a panel of executives, experts, and residents. So really excited for those of you who really want to learn, but also get the support to learn as well. Okay. Again, all the recordings will be sent out by the end of this week. And meanwhile, thank you to Carl. Everybody give a woohoo, high five emoji. Oh, it was amazing thing to see you at lightning speed doing it live. So thank you, Carl, for joining us. And to all of you, have a good day.
All right, thank you so much. This was super fun. Thanks for bearing with me, and good luck using Claude Code.